The woman who runs and owns the Mad Greek restaurant is pushing back, Jackie Fisher.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So which is it? Did Koberger visit the Mad Greek restaurant or didn't he? Now, do you notice in that statement from Jackie Fisher, she goes to a lot of effort. She goes to many lengths to explain how she didn't ask any of her staff not to talk to the media, only to acknowledge that they collectively decided not to share anything. But that is the same thing. It's a decision not to speak about what they know. Do you see what's not in that statement? There's no outright denial in the statement that Brian ever ordered food there. There's nothing about Brian never came to this restaurant. You'd think that that would be the first thing that you'd want to say. So what do you think is the truth in terms of this whole thing? What the ex-employee said, what the owner is saying, what do you think is the reality? And I think that same question, what is the reality? What is the real story here? Cuts to the heart of the 10 biggest con jobs. That's the biggest con jobs, not all of them, just the biggest ones in order of importance in just the first 10 weeks of this case. And so you can really expect many more to come. I mean, it's the stock and trade of a lot of true crime creators. It's a pattern that repeats itself. And so what I've done is I've listed the 10 biggest con jobs in the first 10 weeks in order of worst as number one, and not that it's excusable, but less worse at number 10. So take out your notebooks, make a list, number them 1 to 10, and see if you agree with them, and see if I've left out one or two that you think are perhaps even worse. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, on this channel, we really do take a high standard to things like fake news and sensationalizing and all that kind of thing. And if you don't believe this is the most authentic voice in true crime, I think you can agree that we are trying to be authentic. We are above average in our authenticity, and that means something, doesn't it, in this space, a space that's dedicated to truth and justice and the American way. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. True Crime's 10 biggest con jobs over the past 10 weeks. What would you list as number one? Well, the same creator who came up with the fake screaming audio, and that is my number one, actually preceded that with a bogus claim that the victims were bound and hogtied. Same creator, same fakery. The cops actually had to debunk the tied and gagged nonsense in some of their earliest press conferences, and that he also even made it into the news media. But even that wasn't enough for the creator to ease down on the fake news, and he's since sort of, paused his channel. It's gone from about 250,000 subs to 241,000, and I guess he's just waiting for the whole thing to blow over, and then he'll get back to work. But it's not just a singular creator that does this. It's also a bunch of pawns who see someone putting a story out there. They see the traction it's getting, and then they salivate and spread the same nonsense. The priority isn't whether it's true. It's about traction. How catchy is it likely to be? And how much hay is the story going to make? That's their priority. Should that be the priority in true crime? So the fake audio of screams and the tied and gagged, that's number 1 and 2. Number 3, almost as bad, but equally ridiculous, were the accusations, entirely baseless, by a tarot-reading TikToker that a professor had slept with one of the victims and then committed quadruple murder. I found it fascinating and also horrifying to note how, even when served with cease and desist orders, the perpetrator still didn't know how to deal with that reality either, and just continued. And so now she's facing a defamation lawsuit, aka a real reality check. It's this weird irony of true crime creators who think they are above the law. They think because they're talking about other people who've possibly done something that they themselves are above the law. Number 4, the recording of the screams, right? Kind of similar to number 1. And why wouldn't that be legitimate? Because social media is that good at getting material evidence from law enforcement. The first thing I do when social media bags an exclusive is I check whether the mainstream media have picked up on it. I'm sure that's a shock to many of you. Wow, but social media knows much. Mainstream media is fake. That's why I go to social media. Well, 90% of the time when the mainstream media don't touch a big social media exclusive with a barge pole, it's a situation where it's incredible. This obscure social media creator with 1,000 subs has got this incredible access to XYZ. It does happen. It's just more the exception than the rule, right? And even members of my community who are well known for their critical thinking, or they certainly try to go into that area more often, I think, they were asking, where can I watch that in the comments? I need to decide whether it's true or not. And then even if it's not true, the trick is you sign up for it anyway. It's sort of gotcha, made you look kind of thing. Number 5, the jailer snitch. Well, all you can really ask is why. Why? Was it an innocent mistake or someone badly wanting to be relevant, even if it was reaching? Then number 6, and this one is actually quite significant. This is maybe a major force, a major commentary, a major area in terms of the interrogation of this case. A lot of people are participating in it. On TikTok, the terms IDAHO Accomplice already have 27.5 million views. That's a lot of support for this idea. And that is for the accomplice theory. It's about Koberger, and I think Koberger is loving this. If he knows about it, him and his defense team must be absolutely loving it, because it not only minimizes his culpability. So bear in mind, if you take the position that Koberger and only Koberger committed this crime, and you focus on that, then you've got a particular case. As soon as you say, could it be an accomplice? Well, then you're moving away from Koberger. Then you're turning your attention elsewhere. Could it be this person? How about that one? On and on and on and on. And that basically is very, very good news for Koberger. Did he even commit the crime? Is there someone else with bushy eyebrows? So it raises all sorts of doubts about what we know. So if Koberger did commit this crime and you'd like Koberger to get away with it, this is the way to go with the accomplice theory. And that brings us to number 7, the smiling mugshot. Talk about bad taste and acting inappropriately. That's a reference to true crime, not Koberger. Number 8, it's hard to say what the truth is about the Mad Greek restaurant. And all of these things added together, all of this fake news, all of these con jobs, basically add to that whole maelstrom, that confusing maelstrom. And guess what? A confusing maelstrom is all the defense needs to raise reasonable doubt. So the more confusion there is, and thanks so much social media for participating in that. Our jury aren't sure what's going on. You know what? We're not sure. Let's is not guilty. We can't prove this. And there are other possibilities as well. Thanks, social media, for exploring and cheerleading those other possibilities. Thanks for teaching us how to think in a sort of confused, almost insensible way as well. A fragmented, random, non-systematic way. Could it be this? How about that? Right? So in terms of the Mad Greek restaurant, we saw something similar with the Merry Piglets. Statements that were also fuzzy and inconsistent. But I do want to ask you right now, in the comments, say what you think is the real situation in terms of the Mad Greek restaurant. Do you think he did really go there? If he did really go there, do you think that they recognized him or knew that it was him, that he stood out? What's your opinion on that? And that brings us to number 9. In the same way, the insight from the confirmed sighting of Brian at the Mad Greek, right? In the same way that we get that insight from that, we have the fact that he followed 3 victims on Instagram. That then becomes similarly dubious. It's probably true that he followed at least one of them, but now it becomes kind of wishy-washy. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. And then there's also the possibility that it's not true, because it's clearly hard to prove. So again, thanks social media for helping the defense case muddy the connection the perpetrator might have had to the crime. And even if there was no connection, now between the idea that there was a connection and there wasn't a connection, there's just sort of a muddiness. And that uncertainty, again, is good for the defense case. Even if there was no connection, right, and your prosecution case was, there was no connection, but the narrative is that this is his backstory. You've now nevertheless created a side narrative that distracts, muddies and murks and adds confusion. And that, again, is good for the defense case. And it just makes you wonder about the folks out there. You know, someone on Patreon told me that he went to Koberger's Instagram the instant his name was released, and there were already 4 fake accounts. That's really fast on the draw. That is people who are very quick to try and make a mint out of bullshitting. Apparently the real Koberger's account, I don't know if it's true or not, I've just heard this, was Brian Christopher Koberger, and that's it, right? And that's none of the accounts that we've seen listed, because predictably it's probably long since been deleted or deactivated. It's never that easy. True crime's never that easy. And that brings us to the 10th and last one, the crashed Elantra. Now, that in itself, I don't think was as mischievous as the other garbage. I mean, that I think came from local law enforcement. So where it came from, how it came about, wasn't some sort of cynical opportunism or kind of mischief. It was something that was legitimate in and of itself. Law enforcement came across this vehicle. They were looking for that vehicle. The mischievous part is where social media picks it up, absent of any critical thinking, and then they report on it, making absolute statements. This is Brian Koberger's car. They've found Brian Koberger's car. It's hundreds of miles away, but you know what? It's definitely his. This is absolutely incredible, right? Reporting on it as though it's factual based on nothing, just that it looks similar. And I'm not really sure if that Elantra was a 2011, which turned out that's not even the right make. Anyway, we've seen the same thing with Vigil Guy, Kaylee's ex, and Hoodie Guy. Social media is 1,000% sure until they go into the next breaking news revelation, which is 10,000% legitimate. And it's this whole pattern that repeats itself, not just in this case, and it will continue repeating itself, right? We'll see more and more of these bogus things coming up, people getting their subs, getting their views, and who cares, let's go on to the next one. But I care, and I think we should stop and pause and assess where we are right now. 10 weeks, 10 of these bogus stories. Where are we going to be at 20 weeks? We're going to be at 200? Or are we going to, as a community, start clamping down on it? Because if you don't clamp down, we go into the next high-profile case, and then it's just business as usual. What do the true crime community do? We come up with fake stories, but hey, it's all very entertaining. It's a lot of fun. But weren't lives on the line? Don't the victims' lives actually matter? Isn't that why we're actually here? And isn't the life even of the perpetrator, the punishment that he gets, isn't that also important? That's rational, real, justified, and realistic? Well, how can it be if we're playing games with reality on the other side of this? So as a rule of thumb, if you want to check whether YouTubers in general are authentic and whether they're truth tellers, if they really care about justice, are they telling the story the way it is, or do they constantly exaggerate to maximize revenue? Because that is the recipe on YouTube. Exaggerate to maximize revenue. That's okay if you're doing comedy or you're doing a travel story or talking about politics or whatever it is. It doesn't belong in true crime, with the law, with things that really do affect people's lives. So I want to deal with this in more detail in a live, but let me ask you again, does being an authentic voice, who cares if it's not the most authentic, or whether it makes a lot of pronunciation mistakes, or it sounds like a 72-year-old in India, but does an authentic voice help in true crime? Does it matter? Does it mean something? Does having a real world and living in the real world and having a real world that means something, does it matter? Does it help being realistic and effective and having agency in your own life? Does that matter? Does it matter to you? Now think about it. Mad Greeks, serial killers, accomplices running rampant. Are you a part of that? Are you part of that cacophony? Are you part of the matrix that's designed to turn you into a battery, sort of a thoughtless zombie that just rewards the puppeteers pulling the strings? Or are you apart from that and thus opposed to it? If you are, speak up.
Do something!
Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.